I was tying a silver ribbon around the last gift when the phone rang. It was one of those cold December afternoons in Boston where the sky stays the color of steel and the light fades before you realize you haven't turned a lamp on. The tag on the package read, Dad. Inside was a vintage fishing lure I'd tracked down online, one of the rare ones he'd mentioned once in passing. The caller ID said Mom. I smiled, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and answered. Hi, Mom, I was just... Her voice was even. No tension, no warmth. Just even. Rachel, your father and I have been thinking. We believe it might be best if you didn't come for Christmas this year. There was a pause. Not silence, because I could hear movement in the background. A chair scraping, the clink of a mug. Then another voice, clearer now, male and familiar. My brother Ethan Monroe. He chuckled. No hard feelings, Rach. We'll just pretend we don't know you this year. Make things easier all around. Yeah? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have questions, but because I couldn't trust my voice to stay steady if I opened my mouth. Mom cleared her throat. We just need some space, dear. It's not forever. She said it like she was canceling a dinner reservation, as if my presence was a menu item they were too full to order this year. When the call ended, I stood in my kitchen holding the phone in one hand and that silver ribbon in the other. The package sat on the counter looking suddenly ridiculous. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I placed the gift gently back in the closet next to the snowflake wrapping paper I wouldn't need anymore. Maybe it was just for this year. Maybe they meant it kindly. But one question clung to the air like the smell of pine and old disappointment. What had they already decided about me long before they told me not to come? It didn't start with that phone call. I know that now. But back then, I thought we were still a family. Flawed, yes. Uneven, but still orbiting the same center. I grew up in Hartwell, Vermont, in a 2-story colonial house with green shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind changed. My mother, Gail Monroe, taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school. My father, Martin, was an accountant, not flashy, but reliable. My brother, Ethan, 2 years younger, was the kind of boy people described as a handful with a forgiving smile. He had charm, that slippery kind that gets teachers to extend deadlines and neighbors to look the other way. I was the quiet one. The reader. The one who lined her shoes under the bed and memorized state capitals for fun. I don't remember when it started feeling uneven, when praise for Ethan came with dessert, and mine came with a nod and a half smile. When Ethan scored a C+ in algebra, Mom made brownies. When I won the regional science fair, she said, "That's nice, sweetheart. Did you remember to call Grandma Dad would squeeze my shoulder sometimes?" A silent code between us, maybe. But he never said anything out loud. I left Hartwell at 18 with a scholarship to Boston University and a quiet hope that things might feel different from a distance. They didn't. Ethan stayed behind, failed out of community college, tried real estate for a year, then landscaping, then nothing. By 29, he was still in my parents' basement. And yet he was always trying. When he finally moved out, it was with a new lease co-signed by Mom and Dad, and as I later learned, rent half covered each month by a little help. I never begrudged him support. What hurt was how quietly my own support had been dismissed. I drove Dad to 3 outpatient surgeries, spent weekends organizing Mom's craft room when her arthritis flared, sent grocery gift cards during COVID even when my own hours were cut. None of it made the Christmas card. Ethan was always our boy working things out. I was Rachel busy in Boston. There was a time, maybe more than once, when Ethan leaned on me. After a breakup, he called crying. After Dad's fall, I was the one he asked to handle the insurance forms. He called me the Rock once. I remember that, because I'd never heard it from anyone else. And then he said it. We'll pretend we don't know you this year. He said it lightly. Like a joke that doesn't need to be funny. Like someone who'd already decided I was safe to forget. What changed in him, or had it always been this way, and I just hadn't let myself see it? A week after the phone call, I opened Facebook. Not to check on them at least, that's what I told myself. Just to scroll. Just curiosity. There it was. The family Christmas photo. The same spot by the fireplace. The same red and gold ornaments on the mantel. Even the same crocheted stockings Mom hung every year. Only, I wasn't in it. Where I used to stand second from the left beside Dad was someone else. Monica Sullivan, our neighbor from 2 houses down. I remembered her vaguely generous, always dressed for brunch and childless by choice. Her husband owned 3 car dealerships across Vermont. She was in the photo smiling between Ethan and my father, holding a glass of eggnog like she'd been there for decades. The caption read, "So grateful for chosen family this year." More photos followed. Monica helping Mom with the cranberry sauce. Monica holding a wrapped gift. Monica clinking glasses with Ethan. It wasn't just that I'd been excluded. It was that the space had been filled. A week ago, I thought I was the difficult daughter, the one they didn't know how to reach. Now I realized I'd been replaced seamlessly, politely, as if I were a faulty light bulb someone finally got around to changing. I checked our old family group chat. It no longer existed. Not archived, not renamed, gone. I searched for old tags, photos from birthdays, Thanksgivings, even the blurry one from Dad's retirement party. Many were still there, but fewer than I remembered, and in the ones that remained, I was never tagged. I wasn't untagged either, just never acknowledged. As if I'd been present but not included. There was something clinical about it. No drama, no confrontation, just deletion. Quiet, soft, almost careful. I called Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, on impulse. We hadn't spoken in months, but she always liked my holiday cookies. She sounded surprised, hesitant. "Oh, sweetie, I thought you were spending Christmas with friends in Boston." That's what your mom said. I didn't correct her. There didn't seem to be a point. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and stared at the blank spot on the wall where my own Christmas photo used to hang. I'd taken it down a few days earlier. Without thinking, without planning. I thought I was stepping back to make room. Turns out they'd already filled the space. And the most painful part wasn't that they'd done it. It was how easily it had been done. I didn't make an announcement. There was no text saying I was taking space or setting boundaries. I just stopped showing up, stopped explaining. When friends asked if I wanted to come to their Christmas gatherings, I smiled and said, "Maybe next year." When Mia, my closest friend in Boston, offered to drive up to Vermont with me just to say something to them in person, I said, "There's nothing left to say." And in truth, I wasn't sure there ever had been. I took down the half-decorated tree in my apartment. The ribbon I'd picked out gold mesh with tiny silver snowflakes went back in the box without ever being cut. I folded the ornaments back into their paper sleeves like I was handling something fragile. Maybe I was. The gift for Dad stayed on the closet shelf. So did the one for Mom, a hardcover book about quilting patterns through American history. She used to love things like that. I drafted a card on Christmas Eve. Just a simple one. Hope it's peaceful this year. Rachel. But I never sealed it. It sat on my kitchen counter for days, the envelope blank, the corner curling slightly from the dry air. On Christmas morning, I made French toast. I poured myself a mug of coffee with a splash of cream and sat at the kitchen island facing the window. No fireplace, no stockings, no music. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the sound of wind brushing against the glass. I didn't cry. I told myself that was a kind of victory. I spent the afternoon walking along the Charles River. Couples passed by holding gloved hands. Kids on scooters zigzagged through slush and shouted about snowmen. Everywhere I went, the world was performing Christmas. And I was just moving through it. When I got home, the unopened card was still on the table. I held it for a while, turned it over once, then again, then slid it into the drawer behind expired coupons and a few loose batteries. I posted nothing on social media. Didn't respond to the handful of Merry Christmas texts from old coworkers. Even Mia's thinking of you got just a heart emoji in reply. It wasn't bitterness. Not really. It was the slow realization that I was no longer part of their story. And maybe I never had been, not in the way I thought. Sometimes it's not the door that slams. It's the one that was quietly locked while you were still inside. The letter came in mid-January. Not from my family. Not from Vermont. It was from a law office in Hartford, Connecticut. I almost didn't open it, assumed it was junk. But the envelope had weight. Thick paper. The kind that means something serious. Inside was a note, neatly typed. Dear Ms. Rachel Monroe, I am the executor of the estate of Eleanor Monroe. Your presence is requested regarding matters of inheritance. Please call to confirm receipt. Eleanor Monroe. My grandmother, my father's mother. The only person in my family who ever made me feel seen without asking me to earn it. I blinked at the paper. Because she had died 5 years ago. Or so I thought. I called the number. The voice that answered was calm, older, precise. Robert Harrington, estate attorney. Your grandmother passed on November 12th, he said. Of this year, he clarified. I sat down slowly. That's not possible, I said. I would have known. My father would have told me. There was a pause. Not out of surprise, out of patience. I believe you should come in, Ms. Monroe. There's more. 2 days later, I sat in a quiet, oak-paneled conference room. There was a leather folder, a cup of untouched tea, and a man with a kind face handing me a death certificate. Date of death, November 12th. Obituary from the Burlington Free Press. Survived by her son Martin Monroe, daughter-in-law, Gail, grandson Ethan. No mention of me. Nothing. Like I'd never existed. Like I'd never been the girl who raked her leaves, brought her tea when her hip acted up, drove 3 hours just to change a light bulb because she didn't trust electricians. Why wasn't I told? I whispered. She asked that I contact you directly. She suspected your family might delay. He placed another document before me. Her will. Everything her home investments belongings left to me, with the exception of a modest sum set aside for Ethan and some keepsakes for my father. She updated this 3 years ago, Mr. Harrington said, and recorded video messages to support its validity. He opened a laptop and pressed play. There she was, my grandmother, a little thinner, frailer, but eyes sharp. Rachel, my darling. If you're seeing this, then I'm gone, and I suspect your parents didn't tell you. I want you to know I made this decision clearly and with love. You always came to visit. You never asked for anything. Your parents only came when they needed something, usually for Ethan. She paused, her mouth tightening. After your grandfather passed, I gave Gail power of attorney while I recovered from surgery. She used it to take out loans against my house. Small at first, then more. When I found out, I revoked it, changed my will, told them. They weren't happy. Another video followed, then another. In each, she named dates, showed bank statements, spoke clearly, made jokes. She wasn't confused. She wasn't coerced. She was tired, but in control. When the screen went dark, I sat in silence. She wanted this to be protected, Mr. Harrington said gently, and to be sure you knew she saw you. That was the moment, the twist, if you want to call it that. Not the money, not the house, but that someone I loved had gone, and the people who shared her blood had not just let me miss the funeral. They planned for me to never know it happened. They erased me, first from the table, then the photos, then the obituary. And now, they were going to learn what it felt like when someone they'd written out started writing back in. They wanted to meet in person. They said it would be easier to talk that way, a neutral setting, as if a hotel brunch in Cambridge could reset what had already broken. I said yes, not because I expected clarity or even apology, but because part of me still needed to look them in the eye and see if there was anything left behind the silence. I arrived early. The restaurant was quiet, all low lighting and half-filled coffee cups. I chose a table in the corner, facing the door. I wanted to see them coming. They arrived right on time. My mother, Gail, looked older, not just thinner like something in her had hollowed out. My father, Martin, wore the same wool coat he'd had for years, but he seemed smaller inside it. And Ethan, my brother, well, he looked better than ever. Clean-shaven, smug, and wearing a watch that shimmered gold when he sat down. There was small talk at first, nothing that mattered. Then Gail got to the point. She said there had been a lot of misunderstandings since Grandma's passing. She implied that Eleanor hadn't been thinking clearly when she made her decisions, that the videos didn't tell the whole story. I let her speak. She moved carefully like someone trying to reposition a broken frame without acknowledging the crack. Eventually, she suggested that the inheritance be adjusted, that the investments could be divided between Ethan and me equally, she said. And the house, Grandma's house, could stay in the family, of course. Legacy matters, she added. Ethan didn't speak until then, but when he did, it was sharp. He scoffed at the idea that I deserved any of it, said Grandma always favored me, said I didn't understand what family meant. I looked at him, and all I could see was a boy I used to read bedtime stories to, now grown into a man who thought he deserved what he never earned. My father tried to step in, his voice soft. He said, maybe we could find a solution that honors everyone. But I'd already heard what they meant by that. They didn't want peace. They wanted to rewrite the ending and keep their names in the credits. I stood up slowly. Let the weight of the moment settle. I told them Grandma hadn't been confused. She'd been clear. She saw what they did, and she chose to protect me the only way she could. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, just said the facts out loud, the ones they hoped would stay buried. Gail stiffened. She told me to sit down, said people were staring. I told her to let them stare. And then I said what had been building in my throat since Christmas. It was never about me being the problem. It was about me no longer agreeing to play the role you wrote for me. Martin looked down at his hands. Ethan muttered something under his breath. I didn't catch it. I didn't need to. As I turned to leave, Gail called after me. If you walk away from this, Rachel, don't expect to be welcomed back. I didn't turn around, because they'd already told me I wasn't welcome. After that brunch, they tried again. Texts, missed calls. One long email from my father that started with, "We still love you," and ended with, "But your reaction was deeply hurtful." I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That was the strange thing about it. Once I stepped away from the stage, they kept casting me in the dutiful daughter, the bitter sister, the ungrateful outsider. I realized how quiet my mind had become. How still it felt. No spinning, no second guessing. The silence that once felt like exile now felt like air. I went back to therapy. I told Dr. Chin everything, the videos, the funeral. I never attended the brunch that pretended to be reconciliation. She listened, then asked gently, "Do you still want them in your life?" I thought about it, and I said, "Not like this. Not with performance, not with conditions, not with the quiet accounting of who gave what and who owes whom. I used to think I just needed to prove I was good enough," I told her. "Now I think I just needed to stop trying." She nodded, wrote something down, then said the word I hadn't been ready for until that moment. "You didn't leave them, Rachel. You stopped letting them pretend you were still there." That night, I deleted the group chat thread, took my parents' birthdays off my calendar. I boxed up the framed photo from years ago, the last one where we all smiled on the porch like we meant it, and placed it gently in the back of my closet. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed it on the shelf. They kept telling people I'd changed. Maybe I had, but the truth was simpler than that. I just stopped apologizing for existing. A year later, I hosted Christmas for the first time. It wasn't big, just a few friends. People who'd seen the whole unraveling and stood beside me anyway. Mia brought her famous cinnamon cookies. Thomas brought too much wine. Someone brought fairy lights, someone else brought laughter. We had no tree, just candles in the windows and a pot of mulled cider on the stove. Soft music played in the background, Nat King Cole, quiet and familiar. The windows fogged from the heat, and someone wrote a smiley face in the steam. No one asked where my family was. No one made space for ghosts. Before dinner, I walked into the living room and placed a small photo frame on the mantel. It was just me and Grandma Eleanor sitting on her porch. I must have been 12. She was holding a mug of tea. We were both laughing at something outside the frame. There was no one else in the picture. No one else had taken it. I stood there for a moment looking at that photo and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Later that night, I checked my phone. There was a message request from Ethan. I didn't open it. Another from Mom. Just a period. No words. No context. As if she still thought silence could be power. I closed the app, turned off the light. The photo stayed on the mantel. Still. Unmoving. Unbothered. It didn't ask for explanation. It didn't need forgiveness. It just existed like I had all along, even when no one believed I did. You don't need to be in their picture to exist. You just have to stop letting them crop you out. If you've ever been quietly replaced and no one said your name again, just leave a dot. You don't need to tell the story. Sometimes one word they never said to you is enough.